Hey there. Hey, so your question was actually on 12, but it looked like you're having some troubles with interval notation on a couple of early ones, so I'm going to hit those two while I'm here. So this one's number 9, and it was the intervals where it was constant, and then domain and range again. I think you're not vibing with those. So where the intervals in which it is constant, you're super close here. Let me make that a little bit bigger. Oh, well, now let me do that. Oh, there we go. Um, the only thing he had wrong was it's 0 to positive infinity instead of negative infinity. So that will fix that one up. And then on D, give the domain of the function. So when it keeps going like that, and it should really have an arrow, but I think the computer just doesn't draw an arrow. But it's implied that it's going on forever. So that means if this is going forever to the negative, because this is going to go out and out and out forever, and this over here is going to go this way forever, then that means the domain would be negative infinity to infinity, or all real numbers. For the range we want to go from the lowest point on the graph to the highest point on the graph. So the lowest this graph goes is -6, so that's going to be a -6 with a bracket, and then it goes up to infinity because I know it's going in the negative direction, but it's going forever up and up and up. So that would be positive infinity. So should look like -6 with the bracket to infinity. And remember, with domain and range, you're always going smallest to largest or lowest to highest, if it's easier to think that for range, which for me it is. Or with domain, I'll think farthest left, farthest right, farthest low, farthest high for range. Let's see, that was all good. Kind of the same things here. So the function is increasing. So it's increasing all along there, and then it's increasing again right here. And so you were totally close. This -3, I think it's when it's going to infinity that's bugging you. Um, so this is the turning point, so that is where it stops increasing, but it's going to increase everywhere from this point out this way, because we're thinking of the x values on this. So that's why it's from negative infinity all the way out here, all the way until it gets to 0, and then it's going to start decreasing again, and then at 8 to infinity, it looks like it's going to increase. And then the function is decreasing on 0 to, oh, I think you mean 8. Yeah, I think you just read the 5 there maybe. But oh no, or maybe it was this point. But it's decreasing all the way from here, and then it's downhill, 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 all the way to right there. So the interval there would be from 0 to 8. And again, it's hard, but think about where, trace it down to the x-axis, because that's what you're reporting is the where it's increasing or decreasing, not the how high. And then those went good. And then this was the actual one you asked about. So what is the domain? Use interval. So our point farthest to the left, and again, if we're talking about domain, we want to be looking at that x-axis. We're going left and right. So farthest to the left would be -9 like you have, except it'd be a bracket because that's a solid dot. So remember, solid dots go with brackets and equals in the interval notation. And then this piece right here, it's going past 8. It's going to keep going forever. Again, think of an arrow when the graph ends like that. So that means this is going to go forever and ever and ever this way, which means it's going forever on the x-axis. So that should be from -9 to infinity, and again, bracket on the -9. And then what's the range? So range, we want to look at the y-axis, and I know this is a solid point, but the lowest this graph goes is actually right here at -6. And then this appears to go up and up. So if we're talking about where I have values on this axis, that's going from -6 included, because when x is 0, y is -6, and then up to infinity. So it should look like that. Are the x-intercepts? Give your answering coordinates like that. Okay, so x-intercepts have to have the y be 0. So the only two that are here are -6, 0 that you have there, and then 7, 0 right here. And so these others, that's not where it's crossing. They're points on the graph, but we're only looking for the x-intercept, so the places where it intersects that graph. And then the zeros, so that's what that's showing there. The x-intercepts and the zeros are the same thing. It's two different ways of saying the same thing. So if we're talking about x-intercepts, we're talking about points. on the graph, ordered pair like this. When we talk about zeros, we're usually talking about a list. The zeros of this function are -6 and 7. Those are the two values that make it 0. So depending on the phrasing of the question, the formatting is a little bit different, but it should be the same answer. It's still those x coordinates. It looks like the rest of that went good. Oh, and then down here, given the intervals such that f of x is greater than 0. Okay, so that is asking was it equal to? Look at that one more time. Not equal to. Okay. So where's the graph greater than 0? So it's greater than 0 if it's above the x-axis. Those are the positive values. So for this we would say from 7 and then to infinity, and we would have a parenthesis on the 7. I'll show that down here. And then give the interval that's less than 0. So this is going to have this little spot right here at -6. So let me show you that right here. So this is asking where is it less than 0 but not equal to. So here for this function, like when x is -9, that output is less than 0. When x is -2, that output is less than 0. And that's true everywhere from -9 to 7, except for the sneaky point right here at -6, because that's where it would equal 0. So if in the directions, if this had an equals on it, then we would just say from -9 to 7, that would be all the places it was less than or equal to 0. But because it doesn't have the equals, I have to exclude that intercept right there and then not include that endpoint over here. So that's where they're getting -6 to -9 to -6. So that's this part right here. We're including the -9 because when x is -9, y is -3, and that is less than 0. And we're going up to 6 and not including it because 0 is not less than 0, it is 0. And then that's where we do this -6 to 7. So we're doing that whole interval after that. But this is basically just a fancy way of saying between -9 and 7, except not -6 because of that intercept. Okay, I think that was it on that one.